Powered by the Montana Television Network. This is the 5:30 News on Q2, Montana's news leader.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Jay Cohn.
And I'm Jeanelle Slade. Chronic wasting disease shows up in Montana for the first time.
This discovery prompts Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks to put in place its immediate response plan.
Chronic wasting disease is a progressive, fatal disease that affects the central nervous system of mule deer, white-tailed deer, elk, and moose.
And although the deer in question was found to be suspect for CWD, a second sample from the animal has been sent to a lab at Colorado State University to confirm the presence of the disease. Those results expected back next week. Now, the deer in question was harvested southeast of Bridger in Hunting District 510. It's an area that includes a mix of private and public land. Ironically, just yesterday, the state's Fish and Wildlife Commission was presented an update to the agency's CWD response plan.
With the disease already confirmed in Canada, the Dakotas and Wyoming, Montana officials knew it was only a matter of time before it showed up here in this state.
For a long time, the states surrounding the north and east and south parts of Montana have had chronic wasting disease, and it's been creeping our way. And so we've known for a long time that it was not a matter of if we ever got chronic wasting disease, it was a matter of when. And we got our first positive sample confirmed late yesterday afternoon. The next thing we're going to do is start looking and trying to decide what the prevalence of that disease is and what the extent is, how far it has spread already into Montana, and of all of those deer in that area, how many of them or what percentage of them have chronic wasting disease.
Gibson says FWP's incident command team is already in the area where the infected animal was harvested. Included in the response plan, a special CWD hunt. Now, it would collect enough samples to determine the prevalence of CWD and if it's spread.
Now again, CWD is a slow-moving fatal disease that, if it's left unmanaged, could result in long-term population declines. Now, Gibson stresses there is no evidence that CWD is transmissible to humans, but it's recommended not to ingest meat from animals that appear to be sick or are known to be CWD positive.
Fish, Wildlife and Parks encourages all hunters harvesting deer within hunting districts 502 and 510 to get their animals sampled at the Laurel Check Station or at the regional office here in Billings.
Montana ranchers will soon have access to a new $200 million market next year. A new trade deal signed today will deliver Montana beef to China.
Chinese online retailer JD.com signed the agreement with the Montana Stock Growers Association. The deal calls for the purchase of a minimum of $200 million worth of beef over the next 3 years. The company will also look to invest another $100 million to build a processing plant in Montana next year. The location for such a facility has not yet been determined.
Today's announcement coming from Montana Senator Steve Daines, who calls it a landmark agreement that, quote, has the potential to substantially increase Montana opportunity and agricultural exports to the fastest growing overseas market for beef.
This past May, China lifted its U.S. beef ban for the first time since 2003.
This new deal, part of a commitment from JD to purchase $2 billion in U.S. products. It was announced while President Trump is visiting China this week.
Helena's next mayor is garnering attention for his life story and the historic aspect of his win. Wilmot Collins narrowly defeated longtime incumbent Mayor Jim Smith in last night's election. The margin, less than 350 votes. Now, Collins came to the U.S. as a refugee from Liberia almost 30 years ago. He's lived in the Helena area for 23 years. Historian Alan Baumler says Collins will be the first black mayor of Helena and the first in the state, though Helena residents chose one official black mayor in 1874 before the city was incorporated. Collins says he wasn't thinking about making history when he decided to run.
We decided to talk to the voters and see what they wanted. I had my issues I ran on, and then today it's national and people are talking about the historical. I'm still trying to take all of this in.
Collins is a child protection specialist with the Montana Department of Health and Human Services. He ran on a platform to increase funding for public safety and wants to address area homelessness, specifically among veterans and teenagers.
We now know who will succeed Tom Hannell as Billings mayor. After serving the city for 8 years, Hannell said he'll miss the job, but believes that Mayor-elect Bill Cole will do a fine job. During an appearance on Q2's Montana This Morning, Hanel said Cole and the new council members, though, face significant challenges.
Our number one focus needs to be on the budget, and the budget is not a problem that's going to go away. It's always going to be there. So that definitely will be a challenge, and immediately following that is public safety, the safety of our citizens. And when we think of safety, not just fire, not just police, but both of those working together to help solve our problems and looking out for our community.
Mayor-elect Cole and the new council members will be sworn into office right after the start of the new year on Tuesday, January 2nd.
Well, also last night, Lockwood voters authorized Lockwood school trustees to expand their school district to include a possible high school. Now, the district now has 2 years to plan to levy taxes to build that new school. A
measure last night passing with a significant majority, 69% in favor, 31% opposed. Q2's Samantha Harrelson joins us tonight with more on Lockwood's plans moving forward. Sammy.
Well, Jay and Jeanelle, I spoke with Tim Sather, the chair of the Lockwood School Board today, who says they're excited that not only did the measure pass, but that it passed with overwhelming support. To be clear, the vote does not authorize construction of a high school, but is a big step forward in the process. Sather says this issue has been talked about for years in the Lockwood community and says it seemed that this was the right time to move forward.
This is the most excited I've seen the community about this. I don't know that I've run into anybody that said no. So everybody I've talked to is yes, you got to get it done right now. We want it. And that's across the board, people with kids, people with older kids, and obviously the kids, people with their younger kids that will attend this school if it's built. So it's pretty exciting.
Sather says the next step is finding an architect and getting a plan together. He's hopeful they could have something on the ballots again in May. Of course, he knows they can't celebrate this win too long, as they will now have to ask voters for the millions of dollars it would take to build a high school. Jeanelle?
All right, thanks, Sammy. Well, as we heard earlier this week, Governor Bullock is calling the legislature into a special session to consider what he calls a compromise proposal to balance the state budget. But MTN News has learned majority Republicans are already planning to expand that agenda. Bullock's budget balancing proposal includes about $75 million each in spending cuts, budget transfer, and temporary tax increases. But Senate President Scott Sales of Bozeman told MTN News today majority Republicans will vote to include other proposals on the agenda. Those additions include lowering the legally required amount of cash that the state must have as a year-end budget cushion, accepting $32 million in an account held by the owner of the private prison in Shelby, and another $30 million from a state employees' health fund. Now, together, these three proposals alone generate about $160 million toward filling the state's $227 million budget hole.
I think the majority of our caucus will agree that we just need additional ideas out there in order to balance the budget. And so this is going to give us the opportunity to work with Democrats and hopefully with the governor's office to explore more of these ideas in full. Why wouldn't you put that on the table right now while we have everybody here to see if, to flesh those things out and see if they make sense for the state of Montana?
Now, the special session is scheduled to convene next Tuesday.
Q2 News had a chance to join the Billings Police Department for a ride-along today, and it wasn't your typical police situation, however. Those who were pulled over received turkeys, not tickets. Minor traffic violations earned Billings drivers an opportunity to be duped. Turkeys were donated to the police department, so they decided to share the goodwill. Drivers were given a warning and a turkey. Officer Andrew Sanders says he enjoys getting to interact with the public in such a positive light.
You don't get to see the amount of traffic stops that we make or the DUIs that we stop from hitting people or the drugs that we take off the street. So to have that tangible thing to be able to look at and see and know that you're making a difference, even if it is just a turkey in someone's life, is kind of nice.
Pretty fun, huh?
That's fun. I wish that would
the drivers
happen to
on
me.
turkeys, they get a turkey, right?
Right. Still to come on tonight's 5:30 News, maybe it's not just cats who have 9 lives. An amazing rescue story for a Montana pup right after the break.
And coming up in sports, Scott hears from seniors football guys after surviving last weekend's playoff scare against Bozeman.
And coming up in weather, we warmed up a little bit today. We got into the 30s, but nowhere near where we need to be or nowhere near the record. But we do see some 40s coming your way this weekend. We'll tell you all about it in a few more minutes.
You're watching MTN News with Jay Cohn and Jeanelle Slade. Storm Tracker weather with Bob McGuire. And sports with Scott Green.